Welcome to Permission to Kick Ass, a podcast about leaving self-doubt in the dust, punching fear in the face, and taking bold action toward your biggest dreams. I'm Angie Coley, and let's get to it. Hey, and welcome back to Permission to Kick Ass. With me today is my friend Brenna McGowan. Say hi.
Hello.
I love this. We met in a mastermind that we both happen to be part of. And, you know, his name has been dropped many, many times on the show by now. But Kevin Rogers runs this mastermind. It's called the Supergroup, which I fucking love because, you know, I love Disney and everything regarded. So I love thinking of ourselves as business superheroes, the Supergroup. And fun fact, one of the former members' daughters actually drew pictures of us once, all with superhero identities.
Oh man, I missed it.
You did miss it. I bet we could commission her though. That would be hilarious. She drew a picture of me with like a stage microphone, like a rock star microphone, and a phone and a big heart on my chest because people talk about my ability to have hard conversations with people and really love on them, even when I'm telling them, stop, do that. Don't do that. So anyway, enough about me and the Supergroup. Brenna, please tell us about you and your business.
Oh, well, I am a copywriter and launch strategist, and I got started in this crazy online business world, about three and a half years ago. And I kind of started on a whim. It was, I had no real plan. My plan was I was working for a website development company. And at that time, I had worked for, my primary job was raising my children. And then I had been taking like odd jobs, making some money. I had started to work with a friend of mine at a website development company. And the great part was it was super flexible. I could do it from home. But at one point in time, they said, you know, we're not making enough money. We're not going to, you know, I was like the least on the totem pole. And I thought, gosh, I don't want to have to go like get a job. And I like making a few $100 extra a month. About that same time, one of my best friends started an esthetician company, and I wanted eyelashes. I wanted fake eyelashes. And so I kind of took some of the knowledge I had from these like odd jobs I'd done over the years and said, hey, I'll do your social media. How's that? Like your Instagram and your email. And then you give me eyelashes. And that was pretty much it. Now at the time, I didn't have any type of social presence at all. I wasn't even on Facebook. I had just done some like blogging and posting for other companies. And I started to do this, and people started to comment to her, like, who's doing your stuff? Who's doing your social? And so I had a moment like, hey, maybe I should start a business doing this because was never on social. I never knew that there was like things like social media managers or people like it's like a world that was removed from me. And so yeah, I started off, I became a social media manager. Hated it. I would not, but I loved the content. And at the time, I kept on hearing from my own marketing, like people liked my writing. And so I, at that point in time, decided to become a copywriter and pivoted my way over.
That's really, really awesome. I was writing down some notes while you were talking about that. And I love that you were like, I didn't really have a plan. I just kind of decided to do this. And I freaking love that you eventually started a business based on the fact that you wanted fake eyelashes.
Well, and it's so appropriate for me. My sister jokes around that I'm a little vain. And I'm like, it's like the perfect, and to back up a little bit further too, I think the other thing that I joke around is I was about to turn 40 and I had been wanting to lose some weight forever. And I was kind of at that point in your life, you're hitting 40, things haven't exactly turned out the way you wanted. And I was like, if I'm going to turn 40, the one thing that I can control is I can finally like lose this weight that I've been talking about for 10 years. So I did Whole30. And I think that I actually kept to something that I had just failed at so many times before. Like I couldn't imagine like waking up and not drinking French vanilla coffee mate creamer in my coffee. Like there was things like I just couldn't give up, and I did. And I think it was like this like spiral of like, I finally like caught momentum. I was turning 40. I wanted eyelashes. It was like the perfect storm of vanity that propelled me into who I am today.
I wouldn't even say vanity. I would say confidence, right? Because feeling good in your skin is really, really important, whatever that looks like to you. I was making a joke with a friend yesterday because I was actually at a theme park yesterday. And I was talking about, I made this quip about, I hope someday when I have more lines, I'm blessed to have really good skin. My late 30s here. It's like when my lines come in, I want them all to be laugh lines. Like I want the story of joy to be written on my face as I get older. And then I realized I was like, no offense against, anybody that's listening to me that has Botox, that's not a comment against you. You do what makes you feel good. I feel really good with laugh lines. So yeah.
Well, and I joke that I work so that I can get my laugh lines removed and not worry about like taking from my children's like college funds. So
I think that's great. Like knowing what you want to get out of things is really super important. And also so many people that I've coached in helping start their business have this kind of block about where do I get my first client? You got your first client before you even knew that you were looking for a client. You know what I mean? So,
I guess so. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. At the risk of sounding kind of flippant or implying that this is easy, which it's not always easy, but it's worth the effort, I think, to start your own business. But here was something that you want and something that you could help this person with. So it made so much natural sense for you to go strike a deal there. And you didn't even worry. Once the whole B word, the business word, enters the picture, sometimes it seems like people forget about that aspect, that you could just go find somebody who has something that you want and help them with something that they want. Business.
Yeah. And that's exactly what it was. It was just like this need. And I think it was great to start it off that way too, because then it gave me a confidence that when I did quote unquote, start my business, I felt confident enough where I just like threw it out on social, like, hey, I'm starting this business. Is anyone interested? And I got clients almost immediately. So I think but I never thought about it the way that you just said it, that like I went and got the clients and then I started the business. So. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really brilliant too. I want to highlight that is your first instinct was to actually lean into that and go out to people and say, hey, I'm starting a business. Who wants to join? There's an interesting trend in the entrepreneurship community. And tell me if you've noticed this too, now that you've gotten to a certain level with your business, that people that are on the newer end of the spectrum kind of get lost in this research spiral.
Oh, it's exactly what I was going to say.
Mm-hmm. And then when they get caught up in the research spiral, the first iteration of their business is this whole complex, big funnel that's going to attract the right client to them. And they get stuck in building the website and figuring out the offer and the tripwire, that like they spin their wheels trying to figure out so many different things, where your first round of business could be as simple as reaching out to people that you know and going, hey, I'm starting a business. Who needs help with this?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a great way, because even in my latter part of my business, I get myself in and I'm sure Kevin might agree, I get myself in the research trap, right? Like I want to have it figured out. There's so many resources where I went into this like completely ignorant as to what I was doing. And the ignorance, I think, helped me move me along and not get trapped in this, because there is so much resources everywhere we turn around that it is super easy. And I did do like, once I knew, I was like going to the library and like checking out books like Gary V's Crush It. Like that was my like, oh, okay, maybe I should actually like read up on this. But that was where I started. And I would say too, and this is kind of going off in a different direction, if it is someone that's listening and starting and feeling like I didn't throw a lot of money into my business at the beginning, and I'm very happy because I think too, I was blessed. I didn't need to I was just trying to make $500 a month. That was my goal. But I think at the same point, it allowed me to, before I invested a ton of money, I was able to kind of pivot and not have debt or resources or spent all this time, because I didn't even know what I was doing. So
I know.
it really helped.
I love this. I was making notes while you were saying that because I wrote resourceful and underlined it a couple times and jotted down library. You're the first person that I have spoken to on this podcast, though certainly not in the entrepreneurial world, but specifically on this podcast, who's mentioned, I basically self-educated by checking out a free resource that I already have access to versus, and this is not talking down to info products or courses or training, like newsflash, I train people. I'm going to have courses eventually. But you don't have to start there. You don't have to do all of that before. You don't have to wait until. You could just go check out what resources are freely available to you right now or low cost available to you right now and see what you can learn with what you've already got. I love that. I think that's so brilliant.
I guess I invested in a small membership, but the first time I invested, so I considered like April was my start date. And then I did like a low cost, like $50 a month membership once I did become a social media manager. But then I didn't invest till that next year. And coincidentally, the person I invested with was our mutual friend, Chris Orzakowski, and his email copy academy, because I decided I was going to write emails. But God bless Chris. I always joke around with him because I was like terrified. Like Chris, I didn't know who he was. I found him on a podcast and I was like, my husband was like, are you sure $500, is a lot? And I'm like, well, I think it's going to be okay. But I actually I wanted Chris's reassurance. And I remember him sending me a video being like, and that was the reason why I joined, because he sent me a video and he reassured me, which I think there's another story in and of that, right? Like you never know. And now Chris is one of the line items in my monthly profit and loss. But like never, those people who are hesitant, right? Sometimes I think too, as we move along, like the entrepreneur world, we're like, oh, this person doesn't even want to spend $500, but we don't realize that $500 to some people is like spending 10,000, right? So I think that's what I always want to carry with me as I move on in this business. Like every person, every dollar they spend with me, how important and how I really take stock when someone invests when it comes to things like that.
I love that you have that thought process, that kind of, I don't want to say ideology, but that belief system underpinning what you do with your business. Because I do think that that's important. There are certain sectors of the business that really, like the business world and entrepreneurship in general, they're like, somebody's walking around with my money in their pocket and I need to go get it. And if that's your style, hey, great. You're probably like wanting to smack yourself in the forehead listening to this podcast. What are you even doing here? Go away. But over here at Angie Lands, we believe that there is plenty of people who need your help, who need whatever you sell, whether it's a service or a physical product. And your job in life is to go find that person and present your thing, your service or your offer to them as a potential solution that they should consider. It's not to beat them over the head with like, why don't you buy the thing? Oh my God, you're dumb if you don't buy the thing. It's just $500. Why don't you buy the thing? That's not how you build relationships for the long term. And I think thinking about that with a lot of respect and a lot of care with, $500 is a big deal to some people. And I care about that. I want to make sure that I'm helping them for $500, even if I've got a $5,000 product over here. I don't care more about this person because they're paying me more. I just really think that's a good business philosophy in general, to care about people.
I agree. And I think I put a quote up on my Instagram stories today where it was talking about how empathy is the highest form of knowledge. It was a Plato quote that I had never heard before. I can't remember exactly, but I do think it circles back to what we're talking about. Like when we can keep true empathy for our client and what we're doing, that's, then all of a sudden too, I think whether it's our copy or business plan or whatever it is, like everything opens up, because when we're empathetic with our customer, we can help them solve a problem and we truly care about the outcome.
Yes, I love that. And of course, my brain automatically went to people who would probably object to hearing that. Well, but I'm not a very empathetic person. Newsflash, I was not either. You may have noticed a little bit of sass. That is kind of my default mode, but it also meant that in my early days, especially in my 20s, when I knew everything, like we all do in our 20s, which means that I know how other people should be living their life, right? Even if I don't know a single thing about this person, I know that you could fix your life if you do this. I know that you can fix your life if you do this. Do it Angie's way and everything will be fine. I was very judgy. I would say that I probably burned more than my fair share of bridges. And eventually it got to a point where I had to look at me. I was the common denominator in losing all of these friends and not landing these clients with the first iteration of my business. And I think it was John Carlton posted something about getting into the head of the people that you hate. Like if you can't stand this person, maybe the best exercise that you could do is to really try to get into their head and understand them, not so that you could pick it apart, but just so that you can make sense of what they're doing and what they're saying and why they might be behaving that way. So I started a little social experiment, I want to say in my late 20s, early 30s, where every time somebody did something that didn't make any damn sense to me, and my first instinct was to tell them, well, this is how you should fix that. I would just listen. I would ask questions for clarification. And then if I didn't get kind of enough information to be able to process it and figure it out, later on, I would go back and I'd put myself through a thought exercise of in what situation would this make sense? Like what might be going on to where this thing that they said is actually true versus me and dismissing it. And the more I actively practice that instead of dismissing it, well, what that person is doing doesn't make any damn sense. We're just going to ignore them and say that they're dumb. The more unconscious that became to where I find myself being, you've probably seen me do this, like the leader of the anti-pitchfork mob. Wherever anybody is convinced that a client is trying to take advantage of them, I'm like, here are some things that could be happening that could be leading to.
I love your insights when I see them too. They're always super astute. And I love that you're saying that you had to like train yourself to think like this from a different angle.
It was practice, and I definitely don't always get it right. Like I'm human too. So sometimes I fall into that trap of that motherfucker. How dare you? But I also work with a very talented psychotherapist and a life coach that help me to step outside of myself when those feelings kind of step up and start driving the bus. As I used that in the last podcast recording that I did, which was right before this. I'm like, when fear steps up and drive the bus. So we're just going to use drive the bus for everything. When righteous, I am right about everything, Angie steps up and tries to drive the bus. I've got people in my life specifically for the purpose of helping her sit back down. Let's get logic back in control of this.
Not the opposite, but I am a Libra and I am like true, which is like the balance of scales where I'm always looking at things from both angles to the point where I want to lose my mind, right? Because sometimes I need to come to a conclusion, but I'm too busy like looking at things from all the angles. So it's interesting how we're all wired a little bit differently.
That strikes me as such a good thing to know about yourself, though, just personally, how you operate, the patterns that you default into that bring you a lot of comfort. Because I would say that I am, I've done my Colby test. I don't know if you've done your Colby test or not.
I've never done that.
Oh, I did it and I found out that I'm a high fact finder and a high quick start. And I'm like super low on implementation and follow through. So I do a lot of research and I come to a decision very quickly and I like go. And then I lose steam after a little while. So I basically start a whole bunch of projects that I get really super excited about in the beginning and then abandon them halfway through. And so I'm really, really good at doing some research and coming up with a decision quickly. And so it's been interesting to me to be able to coach folks like you. I'm not saying that you're my student, but I've worked with people that say the same thing. Like my process is I need to learn everything. I need to look at this from all of the angles.
And that's why I will always need a business coach, because I need someone to like come in and be like, stop thinking, start doing. And then even yesterday I was joking around that I'm an Enneagram 3. Have you done your Enneagram?
I haven't. Okay, so you need to do Colby and I apparently need to do Enneagram.
Yes, we do. So, and I'm a 3, which is an achiever. So like, I always joke around, it's a very hard life living my life because I am someone who like super like wants to achieve, but then I also want to think of everything from every direction possible. And so then I get like caught up and then I kind of like freeze a little bit sometimes, or I start trying to do too much and then and nothing, either way doesn't work. You do too much, you burn out, you can't go on, or if you overthink. So either way, it's not good. So
I think that's really accurate too, because with all of the different projects I start, I think that contributes a little bit to me feeling overwhelmed sometimes. And, those days that I get up and I don't feel like doing a damn thing is probably because I've got like 5 different projects in various stages of doneness. And I don't feel very accomplished on any one thing because of my struggles to follow through, which hence that's why I hire people to help me with follow through. And I have accountability buddies like Brenna that I can go to and say, hey, we did that recently, didn't we? We were like, I'm ready to have $1 million business. Let's reverse.
We still need to set up an appointment so we can like reverse engineer our $1 million dream.
Yeah, like surprise, guys, this lifestyle that I live where I travel all over the place and go to Disney all the time, I am not actually a millionaire and I am not independently wealthy. I made it work with the income that I already had. Doesn't mean I don't want to be a millionaire. I'd like to see if I could get there, but that's not because I have this need of a Lambo or anything. I just want to see if I can freaking do it. Coming from the background that I have with 2 blue collar truck driver parents and a mom who turned into a pastry chef, like, is it possible? I don't know. We'll find out.
I just want to retire and not be broke. Like now I'm in my mid 40s. I'm like, oh yeah, I want to get to a point where I retire and can live a comfortable lifestyle. So that's where my shift happened into the millionaire mindset. It has nothing to do with like spending money. It has to do like saving it all so I can live nice and like and spoil my grandkids someday. So
yeah, well, I think that's really important too, because knowing why you're doing all of this is what really can keep you going during those times where you do feel overwhelmed because you've got too many projects started and you're being human. When you have a day with no motivation and you just want to sit, like my latest obsession is Grace and Frankie. I just want to sit on the couch all day watching Grace and Frankie and being in somebody else's world for a little while where I can laugh at their troubles instead of dealing with mine.
Right? The escape. Netflix escape.
Netflix escape. Oh gosh. That's a rant for another time too. The boss isn't coming to write you up if you spend one too many days binge watching Netflix. So you got to be the boss on that one and not indulge in Netflix during the workday. Anyway. So I'm really interested in this progression. We talked a little bit about how it started with, I wanted to feel better. I want to indulge in this vanity a little bit. I want to get these eyelashes. I want to help somebody, right? So you barter social media for eyelashes. Then you start a business and start bringing in more clients. Then you learn you don't really like social media the more that you do it. So then you discover copywriting and throw everything into that. That right there, I think, is pretty damn miraculous too, because that's another thing that newer entrepreneurs are terrified, I think, making a pivot. Particularly people that I've worked with in my coaching programs have struggled to like plant a flag, like I'm a social media manager, because they worry that they'll have to stick with that forever, even when they don't like it. And so here you are going, well, I tried that. I don't like it. I'm going to go over here and do copywriting for a little while. Like, can you tell me a little bit more about that thought processes?
Yeah, I think, well, when I say I was a social media manager, that's what I was calling myself. But I was like doing everything for online businesses, right? Like I was blogging for people. I was doing Pinterest. Like, I actually think I was doing Twitter posts at one point. I have no business being on Twitter. Like I started doing, I think because of the ignorance that we talked about, like I didn't know I shouldn't be doing all that. I was just like, oh, sure, I can write a blog. Sure, I can throw it on WordPress. And then I'd watch a YouTube video and figure out how to get onto their WordPress. Like I would learn like keyword searches and how to do Yoast. Like it was all of these things that I think because I didn't know, I just started teaching myself. And I was like, sure, I can do this. I can figure it out to some degree. And so in a very short time, though, I don't want to say burnt out, but I knew I had to make a change because I knew that I couldn't keep learning all the things. I couldn't. And I think that's part of it too. It's just like, I knew that I had to like kind of niche down, if you will, because I couldn't keep doing it all. So I think at that point, and so right before I found Chris, what had happened is I actually found Laura Belgray. And I was thinking about it last night. I found her, I think it's 5 Secrets to Non-Sucky Copywriting. It's a freebie she still has, but I had decided to go into this writing thing. And she had sent a email over like her welcome series. And I remember reading it and being like, wait, like I can make money at this, because I've always had these like weird stories in my head, like weird connections and parallels. And so when I read Laura's, I was like, oh my gosh, like you can make money writing emails like this and taking these stories that I was already kind of doing, but didn't know what I was doing. So yeah, so I became a copywriter and like moved myself over quickly. And it just kind of started from there. And I decided to be very specific when I did move over, that I was calling myself an email copywriter. And I think that's what happened. That switch, I think, set me apart in terms of what I was known for at the time was email copywriting. But I do think as I've progressed, and I continue to tweak and pivot, it's like all of this content stuff that I did at the beginning has really helped me like develop into who I am. Because I think sometimes with copywriters, you know how to write copy, but maybe, you're not thinking through sometimes as much as the strategy components or the positioning and all of these things. So I'm always thinking of like, okay, how does this piece of copy fit into the overall scheme of things? Because that's what I was doing. I just didn't realize that when I first started, that's what I was up to. So
that's really interesting too. And what's so interesting about it is this concept that I run into with a lot of creative people in particular, which is this thing comes naturally to me. This is the thing that I'm already doing because I don't even know any better. Like this is what makes sense to me. I'm going to write a piece, and how does it fit into the overall big picture of everything? Not everybody has that. That's not a skill or a trait that comes naturally to people. So we tend to undervalue those things that come easily to us until we run into somebody that doesn't come naturally to, and we can actually see how difficult it is for other people to think or process or do in that particular way. I know that happened to me where somebody watched me edit an email, and I think I changed like 2 sentences, and she was like, what witchcraft is this? I don't understand how I slaved away on this for like 2 weeks and you edited 2 sentences and completely changed this thing and it's better. And it didn't occur to me until that moment that it was like, what I do is something that this person does not understand how to do. To her, it looks like magic. And that was life-changing to me. To her, this looks like magic. To me, this is really easy. So I think that's interesting that, and I'm guessing this is what helped you move into the kind of launch strategy, trusted consultant role that you now operate in, was this ability to see the bigger picture. What was it that made you notice that you were thinking in a strategic manner that you could behave in that function for your clients? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think what was happening is clients would bring me in. So my last pivot was I really focused last year on like doing VIP days, which I loved, because I think all along is that I'm trying to figure out like this balance of like, how do I work well with clients? How can I take my talents? And, so I think it's been a slow progression. And I was helping people a lot on VIP days, which was nice because I love the fact that I come in, I help someone, they get a great result, and that they're not calling me all the time or emailing me all the time. Right. So, but on the flip side of that, I started to notice like, hey, yeah, I can come write these launch emails for you. I can come do this stuff, but it's not going to work because I know enough about like marketing for myself, all of my background experience. I know how people work, how they think, like all of this stuff. It's like, this is not going to perform well because you're missing, a piece of this huge puzzle. So I think it was just a progression of seeing that and then working with some clients where things didn't turn out the way that they were hoping. And, going and saying, well, yeah, now I could see this is why I should have been more vocal in terms of this isn't going to work the way that you think. So I can come in and write copy all day, but this isn't going to perform because of this and this and this. And I think it's just at that point, I decided that the slightly bossy, the confident person you mentioned earlier came out in me. And I'm like, no, I want to be in with people, helping them call the shots. I want to make sure that if I'm going to come in and if they're going to spend this money with me, I want to make sure that I'm teaming with them to get them the best results possible. And I think this compilation of everything I have done up to this point just kind of lends itself to, yeah, this is what I can do. This is what I have been doing. I just haven't been charging for it.
Mm-hmm. And I see this interesting through line going back to that $500 customer that we talked about earlier, with really caring about people. And I was writing down some notes as you were talking about that. I wrote down setting up your business in a way that you want it to operate, because I really liked that about you talking about the VIP days. Here's what I can come in. Here's what I can do. Here's what I can help them accomplish. And I get this freedom and flexibility. Like I can disconnect at the end of the day and not constantly be attached to my computer, wondering what my clients are up to, worrying about if this is working for them. By the same token, seeing this gap that they have in the strategy, recognizing that they're missing some critical piece of the puzzle, and knowing not just from a like self-protective standpoint, this is how I was hearing it. It's not just, well, what am I spending all this time doing the VIP days for if they're just going to go run it out there and I already know it's going to fail. It was more like they're spending all this money with me on VIP days, and I know they're missing this component, and I care enough about them to want them to succeed. So I want to help them with that.
Exactly.
I thought that was interesting that it tied all the way back to that first, Chris reassuring you over $500 and just the power of caring about your customers and how that started a whole new fucking business for you. Like, how cool is that?
Right. Well, and I never thought about it that way either. I love this discussion. Like the flip side of it is like being very cautious and thinking through the way I feel when someone treats me a certain way, and even in all aspects of my business. Even last week, someone sent me an email and it was like a cold email and I wanted to be their best friend. I'm like, okay, I need to go figure out what they did because I want to be like that person, right? Like that's what so I'm always being very aware too of not just like the strategy part, but the people part, right? Like the people part, it doesn't matter how much strategy you have if you don't have the people aspect of it. And so I'm always, this goes way back. The first book that I ever read, or not ever read, but the first like business book, my senior year in high school, my dad handed me a copy of Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I feel like that has become like part of who I am as a person because I did read it. And every time that I would go on an interview when I was young, I would go and like read that book because I knew if I could like go in that angle of it, but by doing that, it's actually become like how I think. And I do think that's part of it is like, I'm always thinking about like, okay, who is my client? How can I help them? So now as I go into that, but then I have to figure out also like, how do I set up boundaries properly so that, because I do want to be an overgiver. I like coming in and helping. Like I like, right. So I got to figure out this like, and this is the continuation of my business. It's like, okay, now I got this part down, but now I got to figure out this next component, which is the strategy, or like, what's this next thing that I got to work out so I can get to a place in 2022. It's my year, I swear, where I feel like I'm going in with the vision of what I want this to look like. And I think all of these years of experience. And so I think that's the other thing too. We feel like when you pivot, people sometimes think you're a failure, or in my mind, I think, am I being flaky? Like, right. Am I being flaky because I keep kind of switching things up? And it's like, no, it's just because I'm walking this thing out that there's no perfect path set for any one of us.
Yeah. I don't see it like, well, I mean, I've evolved and I've done kind of this empathetic practice, but I could see how some people might misinterpret a pivot as a failure. I see it as a course correction. Like, all right, well, I'm out there sailing this ship. Every once in a while, I got to check because I'm out in the middle of nowhere with no landmarks really. So every once in a while, I got to check all the things that I know how to check and make sure that I'm actually still heading in the right direction. And oh shit, I'm off course a little bit. We got to adjust the sails. We got to figure out how to get back to where we were supposed to be going, or just accept the fact that we're in for a new adventure altogether. We're not going to arrive where we plan to arrive. But I love the way you think, because I was thinking along the same lines of, this people first focus. And it's important to point out boundaries and figuring out how you deliver value without giving away everything that you have. I think that's such an important part of business, because I know I struggled with that for a long time. I switched to giving kind of as a business model. That sounds kind of weird as I hear myself say it out loud, but there was a point in time where I was kind of hold everything close to the vest. You can't get access to this knowledge until you pay me. And then realized that I was kind of shooting myself in the foot because people never really figured out what I knew or what it was like to work with, because I wouldn't share anything. So it was kind of this, chasing my tail. trying to get people to pay me for my expertise, but never actually showing them my expertise so that they could pay me for my expertise.
That's a good email right there.
Yeah, there's your subject line. That's my favorite game lately. So then I met Kevin, and he challenged me to just answer what questions I could, share what I could. And over time, I started being startled when people that I've never met before was like, oh yeah, you're Angie. Like somehow my name got around because I was out there being helpful to people, but I still had this, tendency that I think a lot of new business owners have to just way over deliver on a call. So the fact I solved their problem on the kickoff call for free, so they don't see a reason to pay me to continue. Or I want people to like me so much and I want this business to continue for a long time. I want to have a relationship, right? So I give them more than we agreed to, which doesn't help. But recently, I've been experimenting with just telling people what's on my mind and trying to do it in a caring, back to the people first matter. So recently I had a client that had hired me for 2 consultation calls and they wanted to talk to me about a launch strategy. And they just wanted to have me on those calls so that they could ask me all their questions as they were planning this out, get some direction, some advice from me, and then go take it. It morphed into them asking me to look at their emails, which was outside of the scope, right, of 2 consultation calls. I did the first couple, and then it started becoming, just as a favor. And it was quick and easy for me. The aforementioned, I've got skills that are difficult for them. It literally took me like 5 or 10 minutes to edit these emails. So I didn't see it as a problem at first until it became, they asked me to review every email and the deadlines are getting tighter and tighter. It's like, we just wrote this email. We'd like to send it out in 2 hours. Could you take a look? So finally, when I got to that point where I was a little bit frustrated that I was giving a little bit too much, that was when I decided something needs to be said.
So what did you say? Because this has been me, but then I'll just run myself into the ground until I can't. So I want to know what you said to course correct this.
Mm-hmm. And I was very deliberate and took a little bit of time to think about the way that I wanted to say it with them, because I wanted to make it clear that I wanted to continue to work with them. Mm-hmm. So I went to them, and I'm loosely paraphrasing here, and said something to that fact. Okay, well, at this point, we're a little bit outside of the scope of the agreement, which, as you remember, was for 2 consultation calls. Now I'm editing. It is taking up a little bit of my time. So would it be fair for me to go ahead and apply the second call consultation fee to the editing that I've done so far? And then if you need to book a second call to talk to me, we can just do that at the normal rate. And they came back and they were like, yeah, absolutely. We recognize that this is outside of the scope. That sounds fair to us. So that's a trick that I learned from a business coach who specializes in like team connection, team communication. And I'm thinking this, invites a conversation. I'm thinking this, what are you thinking? Instead of me, well, you should pay me for the time that I spent editing this email, you jackass. Why don't you realize that I was working out of scope? Being confrontational naturally sets somebody else up to be defensive, which is not actually going to lead to a productive conversation. So I like to leave it kind of soft and open-ended like that. So would it be fair, since I'm doing this extra work, just like underscoring, I'm doing extra work, would it be fair for me to apply this fee that you've already paid for the consultation call to the edits? And then if you need the extra consultation call, we can book another one at the rate. And they agreed right away.
Okay, so after this comes out, I'm going to go back and transcribe what you just said and save it. Everyone should save this because it was so good. And I love what you said. I'm thinking this, the way that you said it in such a way, I'm definitely not someone, I'm afraid of being confrontational to the point where I'm very unconfrontational, to my own demise. But I love the way that you did it, where you were able to assert what you needed, but do it in a way where it felt, where they weren't feeling defensive the way that you put it. So that was genius, by the way.
And this is a practice and an evolution too. And I got that from Annie Hyman Pratt, who works with teams at super high level. She's a genius at this kind of communication and language and kind of helping defuse situations that have gotten really tense and figuring out how to start the communication again. She's a genius at all of this for, how I learned and how I got to this point. Definitely look to her for leadership. But this has been a practice too. And it first started with needing to acknowledge and honor the fact that sometimes in business, I get frustrated. Sometimes the client frustrates me because they do something or they make an assumption that's not necessarily true, or they do something that's really inconvenient to me. Sometimes I frustrate myself because I overcommit to something, or I gave myself an unrealistic timeline, or I didn't charge enough. So it started with, in the course of business, giving myself permission to be like, I'm frustrated, I'm pissed off, I'm stressed out right now. Okay, what can be done around this to resolve this? Sometimes nothing can be done. Sometimes we're too far down the path and it's not worth readjusting everything. So like, there's all these different factors that come into play, but mostly it starts with recognizing something needs to be said. Just like I said,
Right.
They've asked me to do a bunch of work that's outside the scope. And even though it's easy for me, that doesn't mean that there's not a time component to it. So something needs to be said. And Annie puts that, I think, brilliantly, like the conditions and the assumptions that we made at the start of our agreement have changed. So now we need to make a new plan. And when I started thinking of it like that way, it became less about confrontation or trying to win them over and get their approval on something, and more about connecting, like person to person, and saying, so this has changed. What else will change in order to make this closer to the initial agreement that we had so that it works for both of us?
Right. And being okay with the evolution sometimes, right? Like sometimes things have to evolve because once you get into a project, it's not quite the same, or people need different support, or you're seeing something that you didn't know of. So I like the way that you put that as well. It's like, okay, it's not that someone's trying to take something from you. It's just something has evolved and we need to course correct or figure out how to do it so we can work together in a positive way where everyone's needs, if you will, are getting met. So
it's hard and it's an ongoing process. I know a lot of people have told you about the little heart drawing and the fact that I can have hard conversations. I don't always get them right. I don't always leave people without tears, which makes me very upset. I don't like making people cry, but I know sometimes having hard conversations leads to a lot of big feelings. And I have cried at those conversations myself too. But that people first thing, I just want to circle back to what you said, caring about them as a person, caring about their business, recognizing when you're getting frustrated, okay, I care about this person and I'm frustrated. What do we do to resolve this? And just taking that people first, problem solving mentality, I think will take you really, really, really far in business. Not just you, Brenna, but like everybody listening to this.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. Absolutely.
Oh man, this has been so fantastic. I love how clearly we can just like see this progression of experimentation and clients and just kind of, I don't want to say stumbling because that's not the right word, but just making a choice, figuring out what happened. I like this, I don't like this, and keeping on moving forward and making better decisions as you have more data. I freaking love this path. And I hope that everybody emulates it. If you want eyelashes, go start a business. Like clearly, this is the takeaway.
Whole30. I had this joke in my welcome series because I talk about like going on Whole30 and like how to ripping all the goodness from your life, including carbs, sugar, and alcohol. Help me start a business, right? Like
stripping out everything that makes life worth living helps me start a business.
Pretty much.
Fantastic. All right, Brenna, this has been such a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for having this with me. Tell us a little bit more about your business and where to find you on the internet.
Right. Well, and my pivots have led me, and you kind of talked about it a little earlier, which is moving over to help people with strategy. And and once again, I have these like little light bulbs moments with this conversation. I think because I am a people person, I have really started to focus my business on, and I do all types of launch strategy, but really focusing on the part that comes right before your doors open on a live launch, which is the pre-launch. And I do this too, because it kind of takes that content, strategy, people first component and combines them all into creating an effective strategy that helps you go into your launches more confident, less stressed, and more profitable because you have more time. You're not putting all of this effort into trying to sell to someone in a 5 to 7 day period. We're actually kind of pre-selling all along. So I just created a brand new freebie. Actually, it's my pre-launch plan cheat sheet, which gives you my formula to what someone has to believe before they buy from you. And I give a whole bunch of content ideas on how to create content going into your pre-launch. So that you can find me at brennamcgowan.co. And then that cheat sheet is brennamcgowan.co/cheat sheet.
Fantastic. And also you should follow Brenna on Instagram because she posts all kinds of smart ththings. Totally not doing a shameless plug for the fact that you promoted the podcast today.
Oh, that's the thing. And growing my business, I didn't do this because this is what I wanted, but I constantly share other people, shout people out. I try and really not go into things, not all the time. Sometimes it's rough, but try not to be competitive, that I want to like support people and help. I feel like we all kind of, in a cheesy way, we all build each other up, right? When we help each other out. And so I love Instagram. I spend too much time over there. But yes, come find me on Instagram and come say hi.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show. We're going to have to do this again.
Thank you.
So that is it. Another awesome episode of Permission to Kick Ass on the books. If you want to know more about the show, if you want to know more about me, Angie Coley, and the mission I'm on to help entrepreneurs punch fear in the face and do big, bold things, then head on over to permissiontokickass.com. That is all one word together, permissiontokickass.com. Make sure to sign up for my email list so that you know whenever there's a hot, fresh, and ready podcast episode out for you. And also on Mondays, I like to send out a little newsletter called Kick Monday's Ass. I'm sure you're totally surprised by that. So thank you for being here with me today. I'm Angie Coley. Make sure that you share this with a friend that needs to hear this message today. Like it, share it, comment wherever you're listening to this today, and let's go kick some ass.